So, all right, Final Fantasy tier list. So we're gonna start with Final Fantasy 1, obviously, and just go through 1 through 16, right? So, Final Fantasy 1, I didn't play Final Fantasy 1 until way later, because Final Fantasy 1 came out and I was alive, but I was really, really small, right? I didn't play Final Fantasy 1 until, like, Final Fantasy 4 had already been out. The first game in any series, especially a game that starts a series like Final Fantasy, even if the game itself doesn't hold up, because let's be real, Final Fantasy 1 did not age well at all. But we're going to put Final Fantasy as a baseline. We're going to put Final Fantasy 1 in B tier to kind of give us like a base footing, right? But there's a lot of room in either direction. I would say Final Fantasy 1 is a high B, because to be honest with you, this is going to be the easiest shit of my life right here, right? And just tell me if you'd agree or disagree. Final Fantasy 2 and 3 are almost identical in quality and in terms of how good of a game they are to Final Fantasy. 1, 2, and 3 were not that different. And the thing is my memory of Final Fantasy 1 is pretty good. My memory of 2 and 3 is not great. I think we can do this. I think Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3, I think this is pretty accurate, right? And let's be honest, most people that have played all the Final Fantasy games in this day and age have probably not even played any of these three, right? What percentage of people that are obsessed with Final Fantasy do you think have played 1, 2, and 3? I would say less than half. I mean, Final Fantasy itself as a game broke new ground. For being a game like this, like there wasn't really a JRPG. They kind of made the JRPG. Okay. Now we're getting into the fucking meat, boys and girls. This is what separates the Final Fantasy fans from the little bitches, all right? Or people that have lives. All right, Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV was the first RPG I ever played. If you don't count Zelda Link to the Past and the first Zelda for Nintendo. It's the first JRPG. It introduced me to actual dialogue being in a game. It introduced me to the fact that in a video game, you could have a story, an in-depth story with in-depth characters and dialogue, and like it was like you were playing through a book or a movie, right? So Final Fantasy IV is the easiest fucking S tier of my life, right? Final Fantasy IV, great story, great characters. Cecil is still probably Cecil and Kain are still probably two of my favorite Final Fantasy characters. Rosa was kind of lukewarm. She didn't have as much as a character as the other like romantic female interests that the other Final Fantasy games have. But Final Fantasy IV is an easy S tier. Final Fantasy V. Final Fantasy V was another game that I didn't play until later on, because in America we didn't get it until Final Fantasy, was it called Final Fantasy Chronicles? That was the one that had Chrono Trigger for PlayStation and Final Fantasy V, I believe that is. It's nowhere near as good as Final Fantasy IV was. There's no way you're convincing me that it is. Final Fantasy V is probably, I'll give it a low A. Final Fantasy V was a low A. And that has nothing to do with KT's rating. It's just, I think Final Fantasy V is a low A, right? Let's hydrate. Okay, now Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VI, because in America, we got 6 as Final Fantasy 3, we got Final Fantasy 4 as 2. So I didn't find out till way later that Final Fantasy VI was like actually 6, right? Because that's why I was so confused as a kid when Final Fantasy 7 came out in '97, and I'm like, wait, we had Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, and now 7? What happened to 4, 5, and 6? And then after, we didn't have the internet back then, so I couldn't research it. But then eventually I figured out through magazines and friends that they were named different shit. Okay, Final Fantasy VI is very near and dear to my heart because me and my older brother bonded over this game, and I got really lucky. Obviously, as a poor kid, I was in a pawn shop, and I found Final Fantasy VI 3 on Super Nintendo, still in its box with the box still in its sealed wrap. Someone had just turned it into a pawn shop, and it was a brand new game. It had just come out. And obviously the owner didn't know what he had, so I got it for like 15 bucks when it had just come out. Final Fantasy VI, I'm going to give Final Fantasy VI an S, but a higher S than Final Fantasy IV. It's a higher S than Final Fantasy IV. I mean, I'm always really stingy with the highest one, right? I've got to be really stingy with it. Final Fantasy VII. Oh, boys. Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII, outside of maybe Chrono Trigger, I can't think of an RPG I fell in love with more than Final Fantasy VII. I played that game so many times, hours and hours and hours in my room at night, masturbating.
Oh my.
I mean, playing Final Fantasy VII. I loved this game. Because it was the first 3D Final Fantasy, it could have fallen hard on its face. It could have fucked up bad. And I was kind of like, how are they going to do this with a 3D Final Fantasy game? But the music, the character development, the fact that they kill off a main character and it means something. Final Fantasy VII is the easiest fucking S+ tier of my life. Like, this game is a masterpiece, right? The only Final Fantasy game I would give a higher score than Final Fantasy VII, arguably, is Final Fantasy Tactics. And that's not a number Final Fantasy, so it's not on this tier list. Story and Tactics is better than 7's story. 7 has better characters overall. Other than Ramza and Delita, 7 has a better cast. But Tactics has a better overall story. But you can't rate Tactics on here, so 7 is S+, just how it is. Final Fantasy VIII. Now, after a masterpiece like Final Fantasy VII, man, when 8 came out, I was like so pumped. Especially since the character looked cool, like in all the magazines, like Squall looked cool. I was kind of like, man, what is this Gunblade shit? I thought Gunblades looked kind of stupid, but I had an open mind. I was willing to give it a chance. Final Fantasy VIII, the first disc, story-wise, character development-wise, was good. But the story and all the characters completely fall apart at the end of the first disc when the main designer left to go do Spirits Within movie, that bullshit. The game is stupid. The character connections fall apart. Like the romantic connection between Squall and Renoa is dog shit. It's so bad. Everything's a coincidence. There's a general rule of thumb when you do writing for any story is if something happens once, it just happens once. If it happens twice, it's a coincidence. If it happens 3 times, you're a shitty writer. And everything in this game, all the like coincidences are like 7 times. Oh, we happen to live in the same orphanage. We forgot. The GF system is stupid.
So much cancer!
Final Fantasy VIII is easiest C tier in my life. Like, it almost goes into D tier, but it's a C below 3. I'm being generous, too. I mean, I kind of want to put it in D, man. I kind of want to put it in D, but there's worse games on here, so I'm not putting it in D. Get fucked if you disagree.
Emotional damage!
Lol. Anyway, Final Fantasy IX. When I saw the advertisements for it in magazines, I was still subscribed to, like, Game Informer back then. And after my experience with 8, I was like, I had very little hope for 9. I was like, this game looks like shit. But then I played it, and Final Fantasy IX brought back a lot of the like Final Fantasy 6 and 4 magic in terms of like the medieval fantasy, Final Fantasy-ish feel. Final Fantasy IX is a great story. Some of the best characters in a Final Fantasy game. The only characters that really suck in Final Fantasy IX are like that stupid, what's that stupid Quinn thing's name? What's it called? I don't remember. Queef, the big chef bitch. I couldn't stand that character, but every other character in the game was awesome, had really deep connection, and let's be honest, Final Fantasy IX has the ultimate fucking waifu. Final Fantasy IX has the hottest chick in the entire Final Fantasy series, which is eventually Queen Dagger, but Princess Dagger. She is hot, man.
I've had so much sex with my body pillow that it stands on its own now. My life is coming to life.
Final Fantasy IX. This is tough, guys. Final Fantasy IX is a low S+ tier. I'm gonna give it low S+. It was a tie between high S and low S+, but I'm gonna give it low S+. It's not as good as 7, but 9, man, 9 redeemed it. And in a lot of ways, I think Final Fantasy IX was the last true through and through Final Fantasy we ever got. I think 9 is where Final Fantasy, this is his personal opinion, hit its peak. Final Fantasy X. Now, when Final Fantasy X came out, I was going to, I just got into college. It was on PlayStation 2, and I didn't have a PS2, but my roommate did, so I played it on, and my little brother did, so I played it. Final Fantasy X, for me personally, had some really cool characters. I liked, what's her name? I'm sorry, like, I only played 10 like twice all the way through. Yuna, right, Yuna. Yeah, you're right. She's great. But Auron is a badass. Titus's dad is cool. The story is fantastic. But dude, man, Titus, I can't get behind him as a main protagonist. He's fucking annoying. Yeah, that laugh. Oh god.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
You know Gao from Final Fantasy VI? You guys remember Gao, Gua, however you want to say his name, Final Fantasy VI? He's like if Gao grew up but didn't go through puberty and picked up a sword and learned to swim. He's fucking annoying. I thought they innovated quite a bit with the skill system. He's like Van from 12. Yeah, they're kind of identical characters, and you know that plays into this, which is why I'm going to give. I know this will be controversial. I'm giving Final Fantasy X a high A. Titus holds it back from getting into S tier, and let's be real. If you look at what's in S tier right now, 6 and 4, 10's just not on that level, man. If peak Final Fantasy is what's in S plus and S tier, 10 just doesn't measure up to that shit. Okay, this shouldn't exist. Final Fantasy X-2, fuck this, D tier. Don't make sequels, because literally one of the best things about 10 was its ending, that its ending was kind of sad, and then they just reversed the ending with 10-2 and turned all the female characters from 10 into action, like fucking diehard action heroes. 10-2 eat my ass. Final Fantasy 11. I got Final Fantasy 11. I remember connecting to this game. This was when I was saving up money for college. I didn't have a bedroom in my parents' house because I was just kind of crashing there because I was already older. World of Warcraft hadn't come out yet, and you know what? I went into Final Fantasy 11 hoping for an MMO that had like turn-based MMO, like how we're playing right now in Baldur's Gate, but in a Final Fantasy game, and it obviously didn't turn out that way. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of dumb and ridiculous shit about Final Fantasy 11. Like, I don't think the story was that good. The fact that enemies would aggro you till you walked out of the zone was bullshit. The combat was slow as fuck. I mean, it looked ridiculous that you were a huge party of players all ganged up like in armor and big swords and magic and shit, but you're fighting like a tiny rabbit. You're all ganged up on this rabbit, and if you die, you D-level. So there was a lot of stupid shit about Final Fantasy XI, but Final Fantasy XI had the roots and the spirit of Gen 1 MMOs, which is endearing to me. And for its time, it tried shit in the Final Fantasy series that was pretty amazing. So I'm going to give Final Fantasy XI a mid-tier A. Mid-A tier for Final Fantasy XI. Because it just did so much shit, like, that was just out of the ordinary. And it was... I had fun in the game. It was fun. And it did feel... even though it was an MMO, it still felt like a Final Fantasy to me. Final Fantasy XII. Now, I did like in Final Fantasy XII how they... I'm just putting it here so people can see it. Final Fantasy XII was in Ivalice. You're obviously going to get me with some nostalgia points if you make a game take place in Ivalice, but they didn't play on that too much. And you know what? It took me a couple tries to even get through 12 because I couldn't stand the first character. It was the first time the combat had changed to be more action-based instead of just straight-up turn-based. And I'm not counting 11. It's an MMO. You can't turn-based an MMO, so I'm not counting that. But, like, it kind of tried to be like a single-player MMO in the style 11 was, and it really struggled to hold my interest, man. I'm going to give 12 low B, and I know people will be upset about that because I know some people that really like 12. But I'm giving it a low B. I think it's low to mid B. In fact, you know what? It was better than Final Fantasy 2, so I'll do mid B. 12 was mid-tier B. Okay, Final Fantasy 13. Now, at this point in the Final Fantasy series, I had kind of lost interest. They had kind of lost me as a customer at this point. I barely touched 13, and the little tiny bit that I did touch it, I hated it. It felt like I was playing a shitty anime. It wasn't even a good anime. So I'm sorry. I'm giving 13 and 13-2. Like, I'm just gonna put 13 and 13-2 in D tier. Like, I'm sorry. Like, D tier shit. It lost me. So now we have what I built my entire YouTube and my Twitch quote-unquote career on, Final Fantasy 14. And you know what? I'm not even going to judge 14 based off what it is now. Okay, I'm going to judge this off of A Realm Reborn because that's what's there. I'm not judging this off Heavensward. I'm not judging this 14 off of current expansion, Stormblood, anything else. It's off Realm Reborn because that's what's here. And that was, of course, was the first time I played it, was Realm Reborn. what I built my YouTube channel off of. It's what I built everything off of, my Twitch, what I started off. It's how a lot of you guys watching now found me. So it has a special place in my heart. And it pulled me away from WoW for a while because I was, you know, in an MMO homeless state, and it was sold out. Because if you remember when Final Fantasy XIV came out, A Realm Reborn came out, they oversold it, and the servers were slammed, and so they stopped digital sales, and you could only buy hard copies, and there was no hard copy left in my state. So I drove 8 hours to another state to buy this game. So I drove to another state to get this game, brought it back, installed it, and I fell in love with the game. Like, A Realm Reborn was amazing. Easy fucking S tier. Above 4 and 6. Give them A Realm Reborn S tier. They did an amazing job on A Realm Reborn. It impressed the fuck out of me. The music was great. The story was great. Pulled me back into the MMO genre, which has always been my favorite genre. Restored my faith in some things. And I'm not judging off what it is now or anything. Just where it was. High S tier. It's where it belongs. Moving on. What is Lightning Returns? Isn't that fucking another 13 bullshit? I didn't play Lightning Returns, but because it's part of 13, it sucks. So it's just going there. Final Fantasy 15. This game, if you don't know, wasn't even supposed to be a Final Fantasy. The commercials and the reviews, nothing about this game looked good. And I'll be honest, I didn't play it very much. It couldn't hold my attention. This game bored me to fucking tears. So the question is, was 15 as bad as 10-2, 13, 13-2? Probably not. It doesn't belong in D tier, but you know what, man? I enjoyed Final Fantasy VIII more than what I played of 15, so it's going in low C. Okay. You guys like controversy, right? Because I know when I place this next one, I'm going to get a lot of this.
What? What the fuck?
I know that's going to happen. But Final Fantasy 16, man. I had so much hope for this game because it looked way more mature. The Final Fantasy Tactics team was involved. Yoshi P was involved. And to be fair, I think Yoshi P being involved is actually one of the things that brought it down. And it's not because he's a bad developer. I love the guy. But I think it's because he spent so much of his time on 14. Too much shit from 14, which is MMO-esque, transferred over to 16. No MMO mechanics belong in a non-MMO game. They just don't. And 16 is not even like a co-op game. It's a single-player, full-through game. You guys have seen my review. It's on YouTube. You can watch it now if you want everything about it. But Final Fantasy 16, they lost so much from the Final Fantasy series. The party system was gone. Its take on how to make your character unique with the summon attachments was interesting, but 10 had one better, 6 had one better, Materia was way more interesting, 9's was better. I mean, it was better than the GF system for sure, the draw GF system, but it was still not that good. The music that was in 16 was good, but there wasn't enough variation. Most of the songs are the same. You listen to like the same 7 tracks the whole fucking game. The action combat just doesn't work. Take us back to turn-based. I like turn-based combat better. It's what Final Fantasy has always been best at. But the biggest sin of 16 is the most important thing of any Final Fantasy game is the story. And there's a lot of cool, big cinematic moments in 16 that don't work because the build-up did not... There wasn't enough build-up for the characters and for the moments in order to justify these big cinematic moments. These cinematic moments are not earned. So they're really cool moments, but you just don't fucking care because the amount of character buildup was poor. Or happens that all the character arcs either don't exist or they happen off screen, like the 5-year period where your 2 main characters apparently like fall in love, but you don't see any of it and it doesn't imply any of it till later. There's a lot of moments they could have kept hidden from the player for a long time, and the build-up and payoff would have been so big when they finally paid it off, but they spoil it early, which is stupid. Like, why? You could have drugged that out forever and had it be way more interesting. The story just fell flat on its face for me. Everything that was cool about a Final Fantasy game was not in this game. If this game was not called Final Fantasy 16 and it was just called Random Action RPG 16 or Random Action RPG, I think this game as a whole would be a B tier because it would be a decent, okay game. But because it carries the name of Final Fantasy, I'm sorry. It's worse than 3, better than 8, better than 15, but it's fucking C tier. Final Fantasy 16, mid C. Like, it's, I mean, and if you're like, oh, if you're right now, what the fuck, man, it was so good. If you think this game was so good, you either never played any of the other Final Fantasies, right? So you have no context. So yeah, it's a good game. Like I said, it's a B or an A tier because you never played any other Final Fantasy game. Sure. But if you did play Final Fantasy, any other Final Fantasy, you would know this ranking works because was it better than 2? No. Was it better than 12? I mean, you could argue it's better than some of these in B. Maybe. Not 1, maybe 2, and maybe 1. I mean, 2 and 12. But there's no way this game measures up to 5, or 11, or 10, or 4, or 6, or A Realm Reborn, or 9, or fucking 7. They're not even in the same fucking universe. But that's all you have to do. And if you can't compare 16 to 7, 9, Tactics, 14, 6, 4, 10, 11, 5, 1, 12, 2. If you can't compare to these games because you never played them, then you can't say that this doesn't belong right here. Because it fucking does.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Right, Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's not a fucking F tier in here, Fasoya. So, I can't. There's no F tier. That's why Remake isn't on this list. And yes, Remake is worse than fucking 16. This is my list. Obviously, it's my opinion. As a longtime Final Fantasy fan, you can disagree with it. You can agree with it. I don't give a shit. But that was our tier maker. What do you think, guys? What do you think we should do for next tier? What should our next tier list be? Tier list for Blizzard games? We can do that. Let's do a tier list for Blizzard games. So next stream, tier list Blizzard games. Hell yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun, right? I don't know how I feel about Blizzard games.